and CEO of Brise, and the incomparable Pamela Coleman Davis is joining me today. Pam is a certified leadership performance coach and the creator of modern leadership design. Hi, Pam.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure to be here, Leslie.
Awesome. Before we jump right into the topic, I want to give a quick shout out and a big thank you to our users who helped us select the topic today. We had polled them to try to understand what is in this moment right now. What would be the topic that would be helpful? And what they told us is that they would like to understand how they can motivate and persuade others at work. So here we are, Pam, to talk about just that.
Yeah, love it. It's a great topic.
It really is. I was excited this was the option. So let's get to it. I'm going to start, Pam, with a two-parter, if you will, a two-part question. So tell us, let's just set the groundwork. Tell us what it means to motivate, persuade, and really influence others at work. That's part one. And then tell us why it's important.
Okay. So influence in its simplest form is really you being able to affect either someone or something. And basically, you're able to do that by expressing or demonstrating a compelling point of view. So what that might look like for you is you're able to express your point of view in a way that the person that you're expressing it to is either considering your idea or they're considering changing their behavior based off of what the interaction that they're having with you. It could be verbal, it could be what they're saying, but that's basically it in a nutshell. It's very powerful. And by the way, influence could be positive or negative. It doesn't mean that the way that you're influencing the person is in a positive way. It could be negative also.
Right. And so let's get to a little bit more detail, and then come back to that. I definitely want to talk about how it could be negative, but let's first talk about the foundational elements that are needed to influence or motivate others.
Okay. There's four areas in my mind, right? The first one is opportunity. You have to have the opportunity to be in a position to actually influence, right? The second is intent, understanding the reason why you're looking to share your point of view. The third one is credibility. Uh, why should I listen to you? You have to ask yourself that question to sort of figure out whether or not you're in a position to influence. And then the fourth one really is how you express your thoughts and your actions. That is your point of view. And so when you get through all of those steps, do you have the opportunity? Am I sort of firm in why I want to sort of share my point of view? What am I bringing to the table that sort of makes what I'm saying credible? At the end of the day, the underline really is, what are you expressing, and are you expressing it in a way that people find it compelling?
Right. So let's dissect these a little bit more. When you say opportunity, help viewers visualize what that means, because it could mean several different things, right?
It could mean several things, but what you want is a chance to be able to share your point of view. So it could be, maybe it's in a meeting, maybe it's via some sort of written communication. Maybe it's actually people watching how you're sort of managing a certain project or things of that nature. Everything there's different ways that you can sort of express your point of view. Verbal is one, but people are also watching what you're doing. So the opportunity really is, what are those little ways that you can do that? Is it in like a one-on-one meeting with your manager? Is it in, volunteering to put together some ideas for a new project that's getting ready to kick off? Is it that side hall conversation that you're having with someone where you're sort of giving them another way to think about how to solve a particular problem? So opportunity really is, there are different sort of ways, interaction points that you get to have with people, where you get the opportunity to share with them a different way to think about something.
And so it could be we're invited to an opportunity potentially, right? Like your meeting example, or we may be asked, what is our point of view, our ideas
That's right.
around something? Or we could actually create the opportunity
That's right.
in that maybe we discover an opportunity to some opportunity that we could take advantage of. Maybe there's some new
Mhm.
technology that could make our processes easier,
Right.
or we have an idea about a new product or whatever. Then we are actually creating an opportunity
I agree
to
with that.
be
I
influential,
agree with
right?
that. Yep, I agree with that. It's an important step in sort of figuring out how you're going to be influential, right? Is there an opportunity that already exists, or
Hmm.
is this a situation where you may have to create it? Like maybe you call a special meeting, or maybe you send some sort of business brief or something of that nature to sort of get people thinking about that. But you have to be, it's a two-way street, right? It may be there and you can take advantage of it, or you may have to create the opportunity yourself.
Right. I love that. I also love your a little bit of an, it's not unconscious, but just unknown way that you could potentially create influence in your example of people are watching how you perform, right?
Yeah,
They're watching how you approach work and how you think through problems, or how
right.
you um, approach your day. I don't know what the right
Yeah,
example is, but we should just be aware that that's a somewhat unconscious influence, I guess.
agreed. And it speaks to credibility as well,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
If they know that Leslie is a person that always gets the job done, that sort of thing. If Leslie is coming to me with an idea that she has, I'm probably going to listen to her because I understand that on the execution side, she does really well. So people are paying attention to how you relate to other people, how you execute projects. They're looking at all of that, and that sort of speaks to that sort of brings a level of credibility to you when you're actually sort of speaking up and trying to present an idea to people.
That's great. Let's keep going down the credibility topic too, then, because one other thing that when you and I were talking about preparing for this topic, we talked about credibility a lot and what does that mean? And it really, we to succinctly put it, we said you got to know your stuff,
You
right?
got
You
got
got
to
to
know
know
your
your
stuff.
stuff.
That's right.
Uh, and so you need to, you really need to be, you don't necessarily need to be a subject matter expert, but you need to make sure that what you're contributing is relevant to that particular topic or
That's right.
something. Is that a fair way to say it?
I would agree. It's relevant, but also to me, it has to be accretive, right? When you're having the discussion, what are you bringing to the discussion that's adding additional value to the conversation, or are you just sort of echoing what other people are saying? There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with being in agreement with people, but if you're trying to influence or persuade a certain way of thinking, you have to come to the conversation with some data points, some information, something that's going to be of value, that's going to like open their thinking to considering what your point of view is. You can't just be sort of repeating what other people are saying. You have to be adding something, some additional value to the discussion.
Right. And like you shared with me, maybe it's an experience that you had
Yeah,
that could add a different, open people's eyes in a different way of looking at something. Say, well, my experience was this
right.
versus whatever you're talking about. So
Yeah, and people
let's,
do listen to that.
of course, because that
Yeah,
really happened, right? So that
that's right.
maybe it may be something that they had not had the same experience. So it's something that is new data or new value or new information that's contributing
That's right.
um, to the discussion.
That's right.
Let's go back to intent for a moment, because I think this is really important.
Hmm.
And you talked about you really need to have um, a purpose, or a why, or what you want to get out of a conversation, or sharing your point of view. Let's again, you and I, when we were preparing, we talked about if your intent is to demonstrate, there could be a negative part of this, that if it's
Right.
to uh, demonstrate knowledge or just to be seen, and you'll say this much more eloquently than I will, but that's probably not the most productive purpose for you to have.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to sort of start with what is my sort of underlying motivation for sharing this? Do I think we can save a bunch of money? Do I feel like I need to sort of like put another opposing view out there so that we're considering more options? What is the underlying reason that you feel like you need to share your point of view? Because that matters, and it will dictate how you're going to sort of approach the situation and in what way. Does
Mhm.
this, because of whatever your underlying intent is, maybe it means you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody as opposed to sharing whatever your point of view is in a group of people or something of, it's something where it could like go in a bad direction. So understanding your reason for wanting to share your point of view is something you have to sort of figure out really early on in the game. And it's going to help inform how you sort of continue down the path to sort of get your point of view out there.
Great. Right. Right. And if it's just to be seen, that
Yeah,
could be, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, the negative, but that's probably not the most productive reason to share
yeah. Yeah, being
opinion.
heard, I mean, saying things just to be heard. I mean, I guess that's a strategy, but if it's not adding to the conversation, if it's not sort of helping people come out of the conversation and being able to sort of make a decision on something, it's not valuable. It's not
Right.
valuable.
So then the fourth element that you talked about, and we can just we've talked about it a lot, but point of view.
Hmm.
Um, uh, that's really your opinion or idea
It
or
is.
suggestion, and it needs to. Does it need to be based in fact or experience? Like, how do you to get to the credibility point a little bit? Blend that in. You establish
Hmm.
credibility, and then that blends into your point of view almost. If you've done certain things, right?
Yeah, when you're expressing your point of view, you do need to sort of be upfront with whether or not is this an opinion? Is this based in fact? What is it? People will listen to an opinion. It's okay to have that opinion, but
Right.
then one of the things you have to do for yourself as you're trying to figure out can you be an influential person is understanding what's contributing to your thinking. What are your beliefs? What are your experiences? What are the things that are sort of forming what your opinion is? And you got to be prepared to share that, because in order for someone to sort of receive what you're saying, they need to sort of understand where that's coming from, right?
Right.
I'm not going to be open minded about your point of view on something if I don't understand basically where that's coming from. Because I need to sort of, if I'm going to change my mind, change my behavior, be open to what you're saying, I need to have a little more information about where that's coming from. So when you are doing that, it is important that you basically say, this is my opinion. And then, okay, so what's the credibility behind the opinion? This is my
Right.
opinion because this is the experience I've had. And so therefore I think, versus
Yes.
the here are the facts of the situation. Here's what we're sort of dealing with. And in these situations, this is why I think we need to do this way, right? Just be upfront about whether it's an opinion or a fact. People
Right.
can accept either one, and then you can continue to have a conversation. But the credibility underneath that matters, especially if it's an opinion, right? If it's
Right.
an opinion, why am I listening to Leslie's opinion? Well,
Right.
you're listening to Leslie's opinion because she's done this for 10 years
Right.
and she's had this experience, and and she worked on the last project where we had a similar result, right?
Yes.
Versus some consultant coming in who's got all kinds of data and that sort of thing. They come in with some level of credibility because in theory they've done all of this work, they understand it better, they are an expert in the topic, that sort of thing. So yeah,
Mhm. Right.
intent and credibility, and then wrapping in point of view and what's the origin of that point of view. All of that's important.
Suppose I have a point of view or a contrarian point of view or opinion. How can
You
we
know,
help
that's
people? Yes, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how can we have confidence in saying you should share that, and it's important that you share it?
Yeah. This is the thing sometimes that I feel like holds people back actually, because the risk to being the only one who's saying something that's the opposing point of view could be significant for the person, right? In terms of like how that is received. But it's
Right.
okay to have a contrarian view. In fact, if you're culturally in an organization that is open to all points of view, diverse points of view, that's a good place, and it sounds like a good opportunity to sort of share that. But again, don't be contrarian just to be, to
Right.
have the opposite opinion. Come with some information that's going to help people with why they should consider what you are saying,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yes.
you don't want to be negative or the opposite just to be that.
Right.
What you want to do is sort of say, hey, I think I have another way we should consider thinking about this, and here's what it is, and here's why I'm saying that. Then
Yes.
that is sort of like the groundwork for being influential, because you brought to the conversation something accretive, something nobody has thought about, or at least they're not saying it out loud, right?
Right.
But you're
Right.
giving people the opportunity to now consider that as well, in their process, and
Right.
that's an excellent thing.
Yes, and that's really what having diverse opinions and creating something that's better than we can build on our own in our own little
That's right.
set is what it's really all about. It's to
That's
your. I
right.
love that you say it's accretive.
Yeah,
Everything build all these ideas and data points and experiences build on each other,
they
right?
build. They
To
build.
add value. To get back to your
That's right.
point of the goal or objective really should be about adding value in
Adding
some way.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah, and getting as much information as you can before you make whatever the final decision is, or whatever direction you're going to go in. It's important to get as much information as you can so that you feel like you're making an informed decision.
Exactly. That's the key word I think is beautiful. It does help with informed decisions. Otherwise, you're
Yeah,
making decisions off of just half data. So
yeah,
it's not fully informed. I love
yeah.
it. Yeah. So just to summarize for everyone, the foundational elements that we just talked through are first opportunity,
Hmm.
and either creating it or taking advantage of it when it's presented.
Yep,
Intent, which is why or what your goal or objective is out of.
yep,
Okay, great.
yep.
And then credibility, which will, if you have been in an organization over time, you have built probably because of
Yeah,
past
yeah,
results. But
yeah,
if you're new, it could be about just what your skill set is, but then also making sure that you have some other data or information to.
yep.
Okay, great. And then
If
and
you,
then
if
that.
you're new, if you're new coming into an organization, you're right. It's probably more about what is your experience
Mhm.
that's you're coming to the table with, because they don't really know you yet, right? So you're
Yes.
coming to the
Yeah.
table. Your credibility really is, centered around what you know how to do, what your skill
Mhm.
set is, for sure.
Right. And you'll have that knowledge and you'll be a subject matter expertise in that will help, develop your credibility for
Yeah,
sure. And then your performance will help even further over time, right?
agree.
Right. And then the last point, found is just making sure that you actually have a point of view. So if
Right.
you're
Yes.
so if you're contributing to a discussion, have your formed point of view, even if it's opinion or fact based, and it's
Yeah.
probably honestly going to be some combination of both, right?
That's right. That's right. It's the
But
critical
making.
thing, right? You've made a decision based off of, what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and it's okay. That combination of, it's an opinion. I've come to this conclusion because of these sort of factual things. That's what critical thinking is, right? So
Yes, excellent. Yes, I love that. So so that's all positive, right? Everything, even sharing a counter opinion or contrarian opinion, that's
that's right.
positive because it frees people to think in a different direction,
That's
and
right.
so it opens everyone's minds. But let's go back to something that you brought up at the beginning, that if you need to be aware that sometimes when we are attempting to influence others, it can be perceived as negative behavior.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit more, and how could that happen, or what does that mean?
Well, just again to sort of go back to the definition, it's just simply you're affecting someone or something. And so, depending on what it is that you are either saying or doing, the person receiving that could look at that in a negative light. So your let's just give a good example of, I guess, in a sales organization, we're going to have these sales incentive to do something, uh, specific. And then the person receiving that goes, oh, so I can exploit every loophole in the whatever. And as long as I deliver it this way, I, am going to get the incentive. And that may not have been the intent of the person who was, communicating the incentive. The incentive was to sort of say, if you do a really good job, you'll get this, extra bonus or things of that nature. But because we didn't do a good job of sort of explaining in this scenario, explaining what the rules are and how to go about doing this. And, we don't want this kind of behavior. Rather, we want this kind of behavior. The person receiving that is getting the signal that if all I have to do is produce the output, I'll get the incentive. So that's where leaders need to really be careful about how they're influencing people, because influencing people in this way can get really, really tricky. And they will come away from the conversation and try to figure out what's the best way they can get the output. So you have to sort of put some guardrails around that, right? You have to come with more of the thinking. What's the spirit of the incentive? What it is that we're trying to do so that people can then walk away from that understanding a bigger picture of what it is that you want them to do, how you want to influence their behavior.
And why, probably.
And why? Yeah.
Yes. So what's the larger, I love that. What you were explaining, it took me a minute to catch up with you, is that there's a larger purpose, right? Whatever this incentive is, obviously there's a behavior that's trying to be incented, renewals, or, making sure we renew 75% of our customers, or grow revenue, whatever. And that where there are going to be these unique accelerators or specific campaigns to drive that. But we need to understand why. Is that because we're falling short a little bit, or in today's world, the economic environment's a little unknown. So you may be wanting to safeguard against, a potential recession, or, whatever those larger or situations are. But
it's why, but it's also, what is it? What does good look like at the end of that? I'm trying to influence a certain behavior, but what I don't want is for you to renew at 75% of your customers, but at half of the renewal price. I don't want that behavior. That's not the behavior that I want, right? So that's why when we're sort of in this mode of trying to influence people, the intent is super important, because you got to give people the whole picture of what it is that we want. You got to give them more context so that they can walk away, process that, and figure out how they can do that within the sort of the boundaries that you set. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong behavior.
Yes, exactly.
You're going to get behavior, but you're going to get what you did not intend to get. And that we want to be careful about.
Good. That's an excellent example. I think I'll go back and share a little more simplistic example. And if we went back to what we were talking about, intent, and if we're only sharing, if we want to make sure that we contribute in a meeting and speak up, but we only share what someone else, or repeat what someone else has already said, even if we say it differently, more eloquently, whatever, but it's essentially the exact same opinion or information or data, whatever, that someone else shared, that could actually be seen as negative, as you instructed me when we were preparing.
Yeah, it could be because you have been given the opportunity to share your point of view, and what you've done is repeated what someone else has said, but not added anything additional to it. It's okay that if you agree with what the other person is saying, but are you adding anything additional? Or are you just sort of co-signing and echoing what someone is saying? And so I get that there's probably a slight nuance to that. But again, the conversation is about being influential, not whether or not, Mary's just agreeing with what people are saying. In order for what Mary is saying to have an impact on me, there has to be something that she's saying that either I did not know or consider before, or giving me additional information, right? If Mary's just repeating the same thing, then I would say that she's not being influential. She's just agreeing with people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if what you want is to be influential, what you are coming to the table with is information that people may not have considered or understood. Even clarifying things sometimes can be influential, right? They're looking at data and they're making decisions off of that. And then you have to say, I think we're not looking at this the right way. here's the way to look at this information, right?
Hmm.
That is being influential. You are sort of guiding people in a way and trying to make sure that they are what they're looking at as they're sort of trying to make this decision, that they've got the right information in front of them and they've got what they need so that they can make the best possible decision as possible.
Right. Oh, good. That's great. I think I shared with you. I was actually the counter. I was the opposite of that type of person. And maybe it was a confidence challenge early on in my career, but I absolutely take in information in any conversation that I'm having. So that's what I enjoy, but that would often lead me to just sit there and think about what I'm hearing and not necessarily contribute. So I
Mhm.
actually, a very kind, I had the CEO of a company I just joined pulled me aside one day and said, you know what, you really should speak up more in meetings. And I'm like, well, I don't need to talk just to talk. He goes, no, 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 that's not what I mean. He goes,
Yeah.
when you do contribute, it's very sage. And so
I
don't,
love that. I love that.
yes. And so he was helping to build my confidence that,
Yeah.
because typically it was a very young company. It was a startup. So there were it was a flatter hierarchy. So
Hmm.
I was in meetings with a lot of C-level people at a young age. And so I probably was probably a little intimidated by their
Right.
experience, but that gave me great confidence. So it can go both ways.
Yeah.
Um,
But
just to,
what you're demonstrating, I think, to me in that example is you were very thoughtful. You were always thinking through things. You didn't say it and share it, so you didn't express your point of view, but you were thinking about the topics
yes,
on in a certain sort of way that your boss understood that you have something to contribute. The way that you're thinking about these topics will add value to the overall discussion. And so when we coming back to point of view and expressing that, your thoughts and your actions do matter, and you do need to be paying attention to what's happening. You're in a meeting, there's an agenda, you're looking at the agenda. What um, would you be able to contribute to the conversation around a particular agenda topic? If you can't, that's okay. But if you've got something that could be helpful, accretive to the
yes.
conversation, then there's your opportunity. But you really do need to be thinking about these things so that you know and you can recognize whether or not you've got an opportunity, right, to share a point of view. All of these things, and you may think that it has to be some grand stage where you can only be influential if you're presenting on the at the all hands meeting. No. All of
Right.
these small little incidents, whether if somebody is, asking you for your opinion about something, if you've been asked to sort of jot down your views on anything, if you're noticing something, a trend that's happening that maybe other people are not catching, when you're in that little one-on-one meeting saying something, all of those things are opportunities for you to share what you're experiencing, what your point of view is, and all of those things add up so that when there is some big opportunity, you are coming to the table with some level of credibility.
Oh, that's a beautiful summary to say. It's not always exactly in that big grand moment.
Right.
It's a continuous journey and building of.
A lot of little things here and there. People, if no one gets anything else out of this conversation, is people are always paying attention to what you're saying and what you're doing. And based off of those interactions, they are actually making a calculation as to whether or not you are somebody that they want to go to to solicit what you're thinking. What are your
Mhm.
ideas? How would you approach this? They're getting all of that based off of what they're seeing and hearing.
Excellent. Fantastic. So let's get tactical for a moment then
Okay.
Pam. Let's because this could be an exercise for folks, right? Let's say I have this crazy idea that, we can completely flip our company around and do a whole new product. I don't know. I'm
Okay.
making this up clearly. But let's say, well, this is in a lot of cases years ago, businesses were transferring or transforming from, like a on-premise like license, just one big old payment, that saw their revenue that could ebb and flow based on these very large contracts to subscription based,
Right.
so to flatten it out. Let's say
That was a
that
big deal.
That was a big deal, and that's kind of momentous. But
Yeah.
just for simplicity's sake, there's this crazy idea. What do I need to do? How, like, what needs to happen for me to, and let's say I have credibility. Let's say I've
Uh-huh.
established credibility. Let's give that as a given. What are literally the steps I should take to come with this proposal or presentation?
Okay.
I'm
So I would say, and I know you want me to not to assume I have credibility, but I would tell you the first step is really you need to sort of check yourself to see
okay.
if you may
Good.
have credibility in one subject area, but
Ah,
maybe it might not be in this other area. So there's
excellent.
a couple of questions I think I'd like for you to ask yourself. The first
Mhm.
is, do I understand the problem? Because understanding the problem will lend itself to whether or not you're credible, right?
Okay,
I
good.
understand that the way that revenue streams are being developed, that we can't just rely on a one sale. We have to sort of figure out how to stretch out and use a subscription model. Okay, so that's the first thing. The
Great.
second is, why should my boss listen to my idea? Again, I think credibility has a little bit to do with this, but I understand the problem, but why is my boss going to listen to me about this? And that's a very complicated sort of thing that you have to sort of take yourself through. Uh, Even if the boss doesn't, if you feel like they won't listen to you, it doesn't mean that you don't have credibility. It means that you have to think about how you're going to approach this, right? Because
Yes.
this is an example of having to confront someone who is not on the same page with what you are thinking. So you need to
Yes.
test your thinking and figure out how you're going to overcome that objection, right? The third is, are my ideas contrary to current thinking? Is my idea something that nobody else thinks we should be doing?
Yes.
And it's not good or bad. You just need to recognize where you are in that situation. I am getting ready to say something that nobody else around this table isn't going to agree with, and
Right.
just prepare yourself for that, right? Or I'm getting ready to say something that I think most people aren't saying, but most people do agree, and I am going to be the person that sort of lets it out and gives people the opportunity to co-sign what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
And then I think the fourth way really is, what is the best way or form for me to actually do this in
Mhm.
a way that people will understand what I'm saying and that they will consider it? You do have to think about how you're going to share your idea, right? So in this case, do you share this idea in a big room with all of the executives and not
Right.
have tested it out? Or do you kind of like have separate meetings with the different executives to see how they feel about it, to build some momentum? Your strategy as to how you approach it is just as important as you bringing credibility to the table and all this other kind of stuff, because it can make or break whether or not your idea gets a life, in the around the management table, things of that nature.
Right.
So those are the things that I think you got to ask yourself before you even start trying to do that. You really have to go through those 4 questions to figure that out.
So if I had to summarize, it sounds like uh, you really need to know. Yeah, you absolutely need to know what is the problem or that you're trying to solve, or opportunity you're trying to take advantage of.
Yep.
So you've got to know the why, or
Right.
what's the outcome, right? What is the
Right.
goal?
Right.
You then need to understand current thoughts around this potential idea across the organization. And if you're unclear on that, your approach may be that you need to have individual conversations with others. And that would, another, as you were explaining, that another benefit that came to mind to me is that they may raise or provide information that you hadn't thought of yet.
That's right. And
So
then they could be influential to your thinking, right? Because
right.
now you're getting more information, and so it's a give and take, right? I know that what you want is for your idea to be heard, but you have to be open to getting more information that's either going to support or modify, right, your thinking, because now you've got more information. And people love to see that. They're open to, and that actually brings credibility back to the table too. It's like,
Yes.
they came to me with this. I asked them to consider these other things, and they came back and they modified their thinking based off of that. That's actually that's a big deal. It's
And,
actually a
and
big deal.
And people feel respected when you ask for their opinions, especially if
That's
you're if
right.
it's something some large opportunity like that. Again, that was a company pivot, right? Almost.
Right.
So if that is not something that can just be, you can sit at a table and say, yeah, that sounds
Right.
good, go. So
That's right.
you have to really consider um, the size and opportunity, and then people's opinion, and how do you make sure that you have fully thought about it yourself. So
That's right.
I won't,
That's right.
yeah, yeah. So I was
I
just
would
gonna,
say if yeah, I was just going to to close that loop. If
yes,
you're somebody who's trying to figure out either why don't my ideas get any life, or why isn't my boss sort of picking up what I'm sort of like asking them to do, the suggestions that I'm making, you need
yes,
to sort of be thinking through those four questions, right? It's
yeah,
like, what is it? It's easy to suggest something. We need to add, you know, this kind of feature to the thing. But
right.
what, like, sort of help us with our thinking? Why is it important that we add this particular feature to this? What does this mean for us if we add this particular feature to this? And by the way, why am I listening to you about this particular feature when this is not even your area of expertise? I need to understand. You need to help me, give me some background so I understand why am I even paying attention to what you're saying.
Yes,
And then what does this mean to us if we decide to do this? What could this look like? Help us with the vision of where this goes, um, if we go with this idea. So people have to, even that, no matter how big or small the idea is, you still have to take people through the steps. That's the journey that the
that's right.
person who's listening to what you're saying has to go through, and so you have to be prepared for those things.
Excellent. So one small plug for Bryce here, just because we have a communication module that helps with this, and it actually starts by saying that when you actually go to present and to talk, there's been a lot of work that goes into it. So like to really communicate effectively, it starts a long time before you ever say a word.
That's right.
And this framework, these questions that you were just talking about, are actually in that module. So it helps
Love it.
people to outline what is my goal,
Right.
and then it gets all the way through to, okay, what will be the benefit or advantage to our organization? Whatever organization means. Does it mean my job, my department, my functional area, or the overall company or organization? So
That's
just
that's
just
fantastic.
yeah. So just to know that framework, we have it in the communication module of Rise.
Love it.
So, Pam, do you think have we missed anything? Is there any other
I don't
words
I
of
don't think
wisdom?
we've I don't think we've missed anything, but I guess I'd want to uh, there's a point that I want to emphasize,
Good.
and that is people sometimes feel like being influential means that you're able to get people to change their mind. And I guess the message that I want to leave here is it's actually very hard to change people's minds. So
Yes.
what I sort of coach people on is, can you get them, the first step really is to get them to be open to listening to what you are saying. If you can get the open mind, then you're on the road to sort of changing behavior. But the very first step really is, getting the mind to be open. And so the way that you do that, your ability to be able to influence really is on like two areas: knowing who you are, and knowing and understanding how people perceive you. So on the knowing who you are sort of point, we talked about earlier, what's your thinking? How do you think? What are your experience? What are your beliefs? Um, do you expose yourself to different ideas? Are you able to articulate a vision for something? All of that stuff is important because, like you said, when you're communicating with people, you have to give them enough information, depending on where they are in this journey of listening to you, enough
Yes.
information for them to decide, you know what, tell me more, Leslie. I want to understand more about what you're thinking and how you got there, blah, blah, blah. And then on the other side, how are you perceived, right? That impacts your credibility. If you're perceived as someone that all they do is say yes to everything that's happening in the room, I'm not necessarily going to be listening to you because I can get that information from all of the other people, right?
Right.
Um, People have to trust you and your way of thinking. So you have to have built up over time a trust in your thought process, your critical thinking process, that people go, you know what, I'm gonna like just ask John to weigh in on this for a minute because I like the way he thinks about these kind of topics, right?
Right.
Knowing how your thinking is going to be received, right? Are you positioned with people who are actually influential people? Like, is your boss or your peer group, that sort of thing, are there influential people in that group? Because they give you sort of almost like social proof. They give you
Oh,
sort
yes.
sort of
Yeah.
some level of gravitas that you probably know what you're doing.
Right.
And then knowing when it's the right time to try to be influential, right? You've got this great idea, blah blah blah, but maybe this meeting is not the right meeting to sort of drop that idea, right?
Right.
Maybe there's a different way or form or time. Timing
Mm.
is important too, right? You don't want to, launch, try to ask for a big initiative with a lot of money and the company is going through some challenges, right?
Right.
That might not be the right time to
Right. Yes.
to launch the idea, right? Because you got to have some level of situational awareness of what's happening, right?
Yes.
So knowing who you are, like how do you think, what's contributing to your thinking, and understanding how you are being perceived, uh, all important in your ability to be able to influence. Whether it's big or small, it kind of doesn't matter. Those two things to me are super important.
Excellent. That's tremendously helpful information, Pam. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. I think that everyone can now go persuade and motivate others around their great ideas, right?
I think it's as simple as people starting with understanding if they feel like they've got an idea, you really have to sort of understand, um, why should someone listen to what I'm going to say about the idea? Do I have an opportunity to sort of talk it through with people? And how am I going to express this? And what is the timing on that? Right? It's like,
Right.
this is the idea. Who can I go to? Where can I get some feedback? Why do I really want to present this idea, move this idea forward? And do I have the opportunity to even talk about it to anybody? If you can sort of nail and clean those areas up, then I think you'll have a good idea of whether or not you can be influential in whatever the subject matter is, the topic is.
Good. Excellent. I
Got
think
it.
that's the perfect place to stop.
All right. This was
All right.
fantastic.
It was so good. Thank you so much, Pam, for sharing all of your tremendous wisdom.
You're very welcome. I love this stuff.
So, all right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And hopefully we'll see you all soon on another topic.
All right.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Take care, everyone.